Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Claiming My Mate, Wolf Hollow Pack Series Book 1 by Nicole Howl, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, Lily. I kept my gaze on the floor. I knew better than to look any of these people in the eye. It would be considered a challenge and essentially suicide. I could never survive a challenge with one of them. I'm a human, a servant of the royal family in Wolf Hollow. Forced to serve my captors, the Wolf Hollow Royals, shifters. I shuddered. "What's the matter, girlie? You scared of the big bad wolf?" One of the guards taunted me. He got in my face, pressing his body unnecessarily close to me. I shuddered again. A mistake. The guard's grin twisted into something evil and cruel. He stepped back. "Man, a human rejected you. That must sting, Callum." Another guard behind him sneered. I held my breath, waiting for his reaction. I tensed, waiting for a slap, a hit, something. Praying to the goddess Leto for help and someone to save me was futile. I had never once been saved. I had never once been given help. I had actually given up my belief in the goddess. There was no way a goddess would willingly let one of her disciples go through what I had been through. Sure enough, Callum swung his big meaty arm and brought it down across my face. The resounding smack echoed through the chamber. A gasp escaped my lips right before the guards doubled over in laughter. I sucked in a breath, straightened, and tucked my chin into my chest, attempting to hide the tears that had begun pouring down my face. I sucked my lip in, tasting the metallic blood. Callum stepped up and grabbed my chin, angling my face up toward him. I kept my gaze down. It didn't hide the sneer on Callum's face. "Don't ever reject me again," Callum snarled, his voice deep and rough. A whimper escaped, and it turned Callum's sneer into a grin. All I wanted was to get away from him. His touch made my skin crawl. I hoped he wouldn't take a liking to me. I didn't know what I would do then. "Callum, let's go. The king is waiting for us to report to him." The guard behind him gestured. Callum let my face go, ran a finger down my neck, stepped back, and stared at me. I could feel his gaze raking up and down my body, and I willed myself not to shudder again. "I'll be seeing you again, little lamb," Callum hissed. He turned on his heel and walked away, my body starting to shake the further away he went. "Come on, Lily. We need to get the rooms prepared for the Huntingtons. We don't have much time." Amara spoke quickly, extending her hand. She had quickly become my best friend when I first arrived a year ago, soothing my tears and helping to keep from getting killed by the shifters by avoiding situations such as this one. I shook myself, wiping the tears from my eyes. Giving her a small smile, I grabbed her hand, letting her pull me after her. We walked quickly down the halls, heading toward the main part of the castle. The deep blue carpets reminded me of the ocean, my mind quickly becoming lost as I watched my feet walk down the hall. "Lily," Amara hissed, tugging my arm. I jerked back to the present, frowning in confusion. She jerked her chin forwards, keeping her eyes downcast. I turned to look and instantly felt my face pale. The king and queen were walking towards us. My eyes went wide and my mouth dropped open as I stared. They walked right up to us, the queen regarding me with a worried expression. The king had a stern look on his face. Their deep purple clothing matched the castle decorations, right down to the Wolf Hollow crest displayed proudly on the king's chest, a wolf head with 4 diamonds around it, a Gordian knot surrounding the whole thing. "Lily!" Mara hissed again. I looked back at her, still in a daze. She had dipped into a deep curtsy, her gaze plastered to the floor. I turned back and took a small step in retreat, a whimper escaping my throat when I realized King Huntington was standing directly in front of me. I was staring into his eyes, a direct challenge to him. His eyes flashed amber and a low growl emitted from his chest. I gulped, snapping my mouth shut. "You dare challenge me?" King Huntington asked, his voice low and barely controlled. I flinched, but I couldn't look away. I wanted to. Oh, how I wanted to lower my gaze and let him know that I had no intention of challenging him, that I was a nobody, and he had no reason to even acknowledge me, but I couldn't. Something fluttered in my chest. A stirring, like something was awakening. A whimper escaped me again. The queen stepped forward, careful to keep from touching him. "My king, I don't believe this young girl is attempting to challenge you. She is but a human. She is simply enchanted by your power and strength, as we all. Let us leave her and go about getting back into our home. Your subjects have missed you so and need your guidance," the queen said. The king glared at me for another second, then grabbed the queen's arm, pulling her after him. They passed by me, not giving me a second look. The guards behind them followed, more than a few, giving me curious glances. Someone grabbed my arm, pulling my attention away from the staring after the king and queen. I hissed as the pain in my arm increased. You better learn your place, girl, otherwise you won't last very long now that the king is here. It was a prim older woman with chestnut hair secured so tightly against her head I wondered if she had glued it. Her lips were pursed, her eyes narrowed at me. I gulped, taking a glance at Amara. She had her head down, her shoulders hunched, trying to make herself as small as possible. I looked back at the woman, nerves swirling in my stomach. I knew better than to say anything back. I lowered my gaze and nodded at the floor. She sniffed in disapproval, turning on her heel before stomping away. I released my breath, the nerves swirling in my stomach to the point I thought I was going to be sick. I clutched my stomach. Do you have a death wish? What was all that? Amara hissed as she stepped up beside me and grabbed my arm. I winced. I don't know. What the hell do you mean? You almost challenged King Huntington, the Alpha of Wolf Hollow? You realize that, right? Amara scoffed, narrowing her eyes at me and crossing her arms. I swallowed hard. My throat was suddenly bone dry. Yes, I realized that, but it wasn't something I was doing on purpose. I couldn't look away. It was like I was stuck, I replied, absently rubbing my chest. Amara rolled her eyes. Whatever. Let's get going. We've got work to do, Amara said. Chapter 2. Jason. Jason! My father called out to me. I was helping the servants unload our car. I flinched. It wasn't something I should have been doing. Father hated when I did anything he considered underneath my title, which was quite frequent. I turned slowly to face him. Yes, Father? I asked, my voice quiet. My wolf rumbled in my chest, wanting to exert his dominance. I forced him down, carefully avoiding direct eye contact with my father. I couldn't guarantee a win, and while my wolf wanted to chance it, my mother would bear the brunt of my failure if I didn't succeed. What have I told you about doing servant stuff? You are above such things. You are the prince and future alpha of Wolf Hollow. Doing things like this will just confuse your subjects. Father rumbled. I stifled a sigh. It was always the same. He gave me the exact same lecture every time we got to where we were going. We'd pull in, my mother and father would go in and get my mother settled in her rooms. I would jump out and help the staff start unloading everything until my father came out and yelled at me to stop. Then he would pull me into his office where we would go over things that were completely useless and did not need my attention, much less his. Of course, Father, I nodded. He turned on his heel while beckoning me to follow him. This time I let loose the sigh, glancing back at the staff who were giving me apologetic looks. Thankfully, my father didn't respond to where he could have decided was a show of disrespect on my part. I shoved my hands in my pockets and followed him. You need to remember your place, Jason. It won't do for you to be doing servant stuff when you become king. My father snapped. We walked briskly down the hallway, several servants having to step aside and bow low as we passed. Of course, Father, I responded absently. My mind was drifting, not listening to a word he said. I smelled the familiar sulfur and rotten apricot mix that came with fear as we passed servants in the hallway. We walked past the kitchen entrance, past the dining hall, and turned left, starting down the hallway to our rooms. The castle had a guest wing that was rarely used. The guests who used to come regularly had stopped coming after my father banned everyone from our kingdom. I thought it was an unnecessary response, but after the third attempt on my father's life, he became completely paranoid. My room was on the left, and my parents' room was at the end of the hall. I stopped in front of my door, clearing my throat and interrupting my father's lecture. He stopped, narrowing his eyes and looking annoyed. My apologies, Father, but I think I will retire for the night, I said. Put my hand on the door handle, giving him an expectant look. He released an annoyed breath and nodded sharply. Good night, Jason, my father said, continuing down the hall. I breathed out a sigh in relief that he hadn't pushed ahead to the office to get some work done and opened the door. Oh, Your Highness, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize you'd be here already, a servant exclaimed. She was short and stocky, her dull brown hair lying sadly around her exhausted face. Her eyes were sunken, and she had a sad, hopeless look permanently etched into every part of her. She took a step back, her arms full of towels. I recoiled, the smell of her fear overwhelming me. I sighed, annoyed that all humans felt the same around me. Of course, I didn't blame them, but it wasn't like I chose to be a shifter, yet they were all afraid. Not a problem. I was hoping to retire early, I explained, trying to get her out of my room quickly. Of course, she nodded. We will leave you. Should you need anything, Your Grace, please let us know. I nodded. A young girl scurried toward the door, her dirty blonde hair covering her face. She purposefully avoided looking in my direction. A sweet smell hit me as she passed. I turned, trying to figure out what it was, but the door shut in my face. I took another deep breath, the smell hitting me again. I tilted my head, not quite able to put a name on the smell. My wolf started going crazy in my chest. He wanted out. He wanted to go after the girl. I frowned, putting a hand over my chest. Staring at the door, he pushed hard. I reached out to open the door, then shook my head, dropping my hand. I turned away and went to bed. I grabbed the back of my shirt, pulled it off, and flopped on the bed. My wolf wasn't happy, but I didn't give him a chance to say anything more. I rolled over on my side, trying to ignore the sweet smell lingering in my room. It turned out to be more difficult than I thought. My wolf paced within me, snarling and swiping at my insides every few turns. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I realized too late that it was a stupid idea when I got a lungful of what I assumed was some type of sweet flowers. I let loose a frustrated breath and sat up in bed, running a hand through my hair. You have got to calm down, boy. Go after the girl. You know I can't. She's a servant. She's not for us. She's more. Go after her. I sighed again, running a hand down my face. My wolf had never gotten so riled up before, and I had no idea what to do about it. It wasn't like I could go looking for her. I didn't even know what she actually looked like, and asking after her would be dangerous. I only knew what she smelled like, and that would cause more issues than I was prepared to deal with, especially if my father found out. I finally got my wolf to calm down by promising him that I would search for her in the morning.